So just a few words about why ECFC wanted to sponsor this webinar. So as I mentioned, public-private partnership is a core value of the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative going back to its founding over 25 years ago. And some of the folks on the phone, have participated over the years in the strong public-private partnerships that have happened at the community level and at the state level and also at the federal level. And so this is an ideal topic for us. But also just to say a little bit about Head Start. At Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, one of our core values is to think about the early childhood system and to think about leadership and our role within the system and to help grow a healthy early childhood system at all levels, but especially at the community level. And there really is no better example of exemplary practice and comprehensive services than Head Start. And I had the privilege of attending an event at the Administration for Children and Families that administers Head Start yesterday, and there was a video clip of a documentary made in the late 60s about Head Start. It might have still been called Project Head Start at that time. And what was so amazing about that video was that the lessons that were being designed were really child-driven. They were interdisciplinary. They were based on curiosity of children. They were based on children's inherent worth and individuality. You could see that it was not, it was about all cognitive, language, nutrition, health, being a community member. Each child is like a part of the community. And Head Start really, what it brought home to me again, what I think about frequently is that Head Start pioneered and continues to be the leader to this day in all the things we think of as good early childhood practice. And so as our philanthropy members, especially those of you who are based in a community, think about your local community systems, it's great to think about how Head Start is a part of that, not only as a place that provides direct services, but also as a leader of the field and as a good partner in the whole community for health providers, early childhood providers, and others. So we have an ideal team to help us walk us through this moment in time and some exciting developments in Head Start and some opportunities that are going to be rolling out in communities across the country. And I am going to briefly introduce our speakers for today, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Capizano, who's going to moderate for us. So I will start with Jeff. Jeff Capizano is the president and founder of the Policy Equity Group, and that is a consultant group that empowers socially conscious for-profit and nonprofit organizations in advocacy, research, communications, and implementation. And prior to his founding of Policy Equity Group, Jeff and I worked together at the Administration for Children and Families, where he helped lead our early childhood efforts and also specifically worked hard on several Head Start initiatives, including the Head Start Roadmap for Excellence and the Head Start Child Development and Early Learning Framework. Then we'll hear from Shauna Pinckney, who is still at the Administration for Children and Families, where I worked with her. She's the director of the Grants Division at the Office of Head Start. And it's hard to describe the scope of what it means to be the Grants Division director at the Office of Head Start. Everyone on this call, I think, is a grant maker in some way or another. But when you're talking about $9 billion worth of grants, 150 competitions a year, all of which have to be, the highest standards that we have for integrity in our federal grants. Shauna is a miracle worker, and pulling all that off with quite a small team. I witnessed that many, many times, so we're really happy to have her. And then we'll hear two examples, quite different examples of ways that philanthropy has partnered with Head Start, especially in a time when there was a competition going on for Head Start in the community. We'll hear from Carla Thompson Payton, my dear friend and Vice President for Program Strategy at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in Battle Creek, Michigan. Carla works across the strategies of Kellogg, including thriving children, working families, and equitable communities. Prior to that, she and I worked together at the Office of Child Care at the Administration for Children and Families, where we crafted early childhood policy during the Obama administration around making child care more the child care program, child care development block grant program, more focused on child development and quality. And then we'll hear from Tony Payton, the program director at the CE&S Foundation, a private family foundation focused on education and grant making in Louisville, Kentucky. Prior to his current position, Tony worked in the office of the Louisville mayor as the director of public policy and managing all of the education initiatives. And he has a long history of work at the national level and the local level in terms of public policy, at the executive branch, legislative branch, and also now in philanthropy. So this is a great team to talk to us about the opportunities for partnering with Head Start. And Jeff, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I thought we would do for the remainder of the webinar is that I'll give a fairly quick overview of what this opportunity is, give a little bit more detail on it, and then I'll turn it over to Shauna to provide the Office of Head Start perspective on it, and then engage in a question and answer with Tony and Carla about sort of how they took advantage of this opportunity in Detroit and in Louisville. So I do a lot of technical assistance with Head Start programs, and one of the things that I do quite often is I look at grants.gov and I look at sort of where these competitions are happening to see sort of what types of Head Start programs I could be supporting. And I guess it was about a little over a month ago, in early September, I started looking at grants.gov, and all of a sudden, all of these funding opportunities started popping up. In fact, there were so many that, it took 3 days to get them all on grants.gov. And so when, I looked at all of them and sort of, totaled up the amount, it turned out that, the Office of Head Start is, competing $950 million of Head Start funding. And I think it's important to understand that this isn't new Head Start money, but this is money that is being competed in communities because the Office of Head Start wanted to give these Head Start programs and these communities an opportunity to kind of reset their Head Start models. And what was interesting about this amount is Shannon had mentioned this is a $9 or $10 billion program. So this this funding amount that's coming out in competitions is about 10% of all of the Head Start funding. And, just thinking about it sort of nationally, it really is kind of a unique opportunity for all of us to be supporting Head Start quality and really making a difference for low-income children, poor children. And so we wanted to talk to you a little bit more today about how we can all get involved in supporting these competitions to support these kids. And so one of the things I did is I took a quick look at who was registered. I didn't get in everyone, but the competitions are being held in 162 communities across 42 states. And I know there's some of you from D.C. and these other states on the call. And if we want to talk a little bit more in the Q&A about your specific state, I'm happy to do that. But there's pretty significant funding allocations being competed in these communities. $14.6 million in D.C., and you can see from the slide sort of these other opportunities. And the reason that these programs are being competed, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but Head Start, there's something that was going on with the Head Start program in the community where they met a criterion for competition, which is forcing them to compete. And, just thinking about the Head Start program, and, Shannon had mentioned sort of, this is a model early childhood program and has been a model program for decades. Just being able to support the organizations who are competing is really an excellent way of meeting all sorts of philanthropic priorities within a community. And, just taking a step back and thinking about what the Head Start program is, I think, we hear a lot about two-generation models in early childhood, but Head Start is sort of the premier two-gen model. It serves both children and families, and there are two kind of governing frameworks to Head Start. There's the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes Framework, and then there's the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework. So Head Start has to meet very specific goals for child well-being, but it also has to meet very specific goals for the families. How are you ensuring economic self-sufficiency? How are you supporting strong parent-child relationships? How are you, supporting peer networks among families that are part of Head Start? So it is sort of a pure two-gen model. And thinking about Head Start, I'm from an organization called the Policy Equity Group, so I think a lot about equity in early childhood. So, this is sort of one of our premier programs to support equity. It's a majority-minority program. About 37% of Head Start children are Latino, 30% are Black, and then still primarily the funding for Head Start is going to 3- and 4-year-olds, with less going to children birth to 3. And what's been interesting in sort of working in communities, supporting these competitions, one of the things that communities are doing with these competitions is starting to move some of the money from the 3- and 4-year-olds to children birth to 3, especially in those areas where there's a pretty robust pre-K program. And so that's kind of sort of one part of the reset that communities are doing as a result of these competitions. I think, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people understand is that, Head Start is, the largest early childhood funding stream in the country. And because the funds don't go through the state, it's a federal to local, it's hard to kind of tell that. And so, but it really is a very significant amount of early childhood funding that can be used, to support an early childhood system within a community. And I think, as Shannon said also, it really is an amazingly well-designed program. When I was working with the Office of Head Start, we're bringing in sort of the nation's best thinkers in early childhood to help support the design of the program. And one of the issues, though, is that, it's all about implementation. There are hundreds of program performance standards. It's difficult to meet all of those. And so one of the things that we're hoping to talk about today is like, how can you support the implementation of these models in the communities? So I just want to talk for a second about, why would a program in your community be in competition? And so essentially, if you look on kind of the left side of the slide, you have grantees, and in 2007, the 2007 Head Start Act made Head Start grants 5 years in duration. And so what ends up happening during those 5 years is the Head Start programs get monitored, and they have to reapply. But the results of the monitoring will determine whether or not it's a competitive reapplication or it's a non-competitive. And so if you look in this box around the monitoring, what ends up happening is if any of the conditions within the box get met, then they end up going into a competitive process. And so this might be, the classroom assessment scoring system, which I'm sure many of you know is an assessment of classroom quality. If those scores are low or too low, then that would be a criteria for competition. If they receive a deficiency, which is not adhering to the program performance standards in a systemic way, they would go into competition. So there are a number of different reasons why a Head Start program would go into competition. And one of the things that you would want to do if you're considering working with a program in your community is to kind of determine why they're in competition and try to support them with that, whatever put them in that position. And I think one of the things I just want to talk about quickly is that these competitions have been happening for a number of years now, so we have data on what happened as a result of the competition. And essentially, if you look at this chart, the blue is the number of, or the percentage of Head Start programs that retain their grant after competition. So one of the sort of take-home points from this chart is that, these competitions primarily are a way for Head Start programs to reset themselves. And so working with a current grantee is probably a really good point of departure for supporting, these competitions. but it's also an opportunity to bring other new organizations in to become Head Start grantees, and you see that there are a high percentage of cases where that's happening as well. So I just want to give you a little background on that. And then, just quickly wanted to talk a little bit about, what an organization has to do to apply, because one of the things that I think is really beneficial about these Head Start applications is you don't even need to think about it as much as an application, but almost as a strategic planning document for the program in the community. So the way that the applications work is that you start by, really talking about, what is the need in the community? Like, what are the specific needs of the children and families in the community? And then based on that description and discussion within the application, the next section is about, okay, here's how we are going to meet the specific needs of this community. And then here is my organization's performance, my past performance, and how our past performance will indicate that we can actually implement the model. And I think part of what happens with Head Start programs that end up going into competition, one of the questions within the application is, okay, tell us why you're in competition, reflect on that, and then tell us what you're going to be doing differently in this new grant to help achieve the outcomes that you're talking about in this section before that. And then, they have to talk about staffing in terms of, how are you going to attract and retain high qualified teachers and compensate them adequately. And then in the case where there's something that's going to be new in the community, so for example, if you have a Head Start program that's only serving 3- and 4-year-olds now, and they want to start serving, the new grantees will want to start serving children birth to 3, you have to talk about how that's actually going to happen. So, for example, like where are you going to get the facilities, or what facilities are going to be used, where are you going to find the teachers? And so, you can't just write about it, you have to write about how you're going to implement it. And I think, again, that's sort of to this notion of doing a strategic plan around serving these children. And then you talk about the organization's capacity, and then ultimately how are you going to pay for everything. So I do like the structure of these applications because it really allows you to tell a story and create a plan about how to best serve the children and families in the community. And just wanted to quickly show you sort of the weighting. And, I love doing this chart because it's pretty obvious sort of what the Office of Head Start is most interested in and what they feel is most important. Obviously, they want really strong models in these programs. And so to the extent that you can be a part of helping them develop, or, maybe some of your grantees are doing specific things that, they might be able to partner with Head Start in terms of implementing a strong 2-gen model that will help the application. And so just kind of, thinking about the competitions and this kind of opportunity, just a few thoughts. I think, this is just a really, great opportunity both to bring new organizations in that are innovative and interesting that could be implementing Head Start, but it's also a way for you to support current grantees in reinventing themselves and really figuring out how to best serve the children and families in the community. And, one of the things we're kind of up against is that these applications are due in early November, so somewhere around the 12th or the 15th, depending on what cohort you're in terms of when the applications were released. And we should find that, or we can find that out for you. But some of the things that you can do is you can create awareness of the competition, and just to make sure that people and organizations that might be able to support the competition know that this is happening. You can connect with your current Head Start grantee and try to figure out sort of how to bring the community together to have a conversation about the different ways that you can harness all the resources in the community to support the new Head Start grantee. You can have a community conversation among the schools and the Head Start programs and figure out ways in which you can partner around this grant. And so those are just a few thoughts. I think we take a couple questions before we hand it over to Shauna. If you guys have any questions kind of just on the opportunity itself. And Shauna, being from the Office of Head Start, can chime in too with the answers.
Hi, Jeff. So this is Shannon. We do have one question. It might come up in the next set of slides. I'm not sure if Sean is going to share, but good to say right now. Where could somebody look if they wanted to know if their state has competitions coming up?
Yeah, so you can look on grants.gov is one place, but I also have a document where I've tried to organize all of the competitions that I can send out as well. So, and if you want to, type in your state, I can let you know even sort of towards the end of the call after Shauna's done.
And this is Shauna as well. Another great website is the Administration for Children and Families website, which is acf.hhs.gov. On that page, if folks select the Grants and Funding tab, you'll be able to find our program office, the Office of Head Start, and there you will see and be able to sort all of our available funding opportunity announcements.
And I will say, having looked at both, that the Office of Head Start one is much more easily navigable. So we will send out a link. We'll send out a link to everybody. But I will say we have Montana, Missouri, and Ohio all writing in to say that they are interested in whether or not. So I don't know off the top of your heads if you want to say anything about Montana, Missouri, and Ohio before we turn it over to Shauna's presentation.
Yeah, so unfortunately nothing in Montana. Ohio has 36 million in competitions happening across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different localities. I think, rather than going through them all, we'll definitely get this document out to you. But there's a lot going on in definitely in Ohio, and then also in Missouri. Let's see, quickly. Yes, there's 34 million across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different communities. So we'll get this out to you so you can have this. And yes, a lot in New Jersey as well.
So we'll get this out to everybody. It sounds like, well, the thing that makes me happy is I think you're all already thinking about what you could do and how it relates to your state. So this is great. So I think this is, Jeff, maybe we'll go ahead and turn it over to Shauna and then take some more questions as things spark for people.
That sounds great. Shauna, take it away.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to speak with folks. This is a really important group to me personally, but also to the Office of Head Start. When we go all the way back to 2011, 2012, where we were just at the beginning of launching what for us has really become a major sea change in Head Start, the transition of grants that before 2011, because of the reauthorization, had grantees and organizations basically had their grant in perpetuity unless there was a serious finding that required us federally to terminate their award or to suspend their funding. So to permanently shift all of that money and funding from an indefinite project period to grants that are awarded and reviewed every 5 years was a major shift for Head Start and early Head Start grantees. And so for us to embark on that work was, as Shannon indicated, truly a tremendous effort for staff here at the Office of Head Start. We learned many things in the first formative years of implementing, for us, what we call the designation renewal system, and continue to learn as we go through all of the subsequent years. One of the really important things that we learned initially was that we didn't have resources and in some cases the knowledge to adequately reach the true depth in any particular community. And then we also learned that there was a whole lot about Head Start as a program, what it means to be a grantee, and then this mysterious competitive process that very few folks, including some of our grantees at the time, even had knowledge of. And so you could imagine the combination of having this large group and large funding level available in all of these communities across the country, and then partnering with our awareness that there was a deep lack of knowledge and information in those communities amongst its partners and providers who could serve as viable quality Head Start and Early Head Start grantees moving forward, for us was a really significant challenge, and we did not have the resources or knowledge to address that. And so very early on, we engaged in public-private partnerships with foundations at that time, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Kresge Foundation, and some other smaller community foundations were all really the pioneers for us of just what has been an invaluable partnership to not only make sure that we're able to reach really important partners for us in local communities, but then certainly, I think as Jeff indicated, to extend and leverage our federal dollars over the next several years that grantees are providing services in communities. It has really just been tremendous for us. As you might imagine, as a federal agency, part of it is how far does our role extend? And then really, at some point, we lose flexibilities just in terms of what we can do in terms of outreach and the types of support that applicants might need to become a quality provider moving forward. So these partnerships with the philanthropic community have been extremely important, have produced some incredible outcomes in many communities across the country, and we really hope and look forward to those continuing in the future. I think as Jeff said, we have annually now, probably in the fall of every year, we do our large posting of what we call service area specific grants. And so those are grant funds for us in the Head Start program where we have an organization that is being recompeted. We have to make that specific amount of funding available for a specific service area or community where children are currently being served and where those services can continue in the future. So all of our funding is allocated to specific communities across the country. That said, I think it's really important to note that there are some flexibilities when we announce this money for applicants in a community to take. And I won't go into all of them, but for example, all of our competitions at this point are announced as we call a Head Start or Early Head Start model or approach. And what that means for the applicants is it is really their choice based on the need in the community to propose what services they think best meets the need based on the eligible population that exists. So if you have a grantee who is currently only providing Head Start services, but the demographics has shifted, the ages of eligible children has changed, or due to other geographic determinants, the service area has changed slightly, the organization in this example could say, we are in a community where state-based pre-K is really serving the majority of preschool-age children. However, we see an increased need for infant and toddler care, and so we want to take this funding that was previously available for 3- and 4-year-olds and rather serve children prenatally to the age of 3. And so we think these opportunities and that kind of flexibility, our hope is that it creates a real opportunity for communities to come together, have the important conversations about what is the need now, what will be the need in the future, and how can we think creatively about this available funding to make sure that it really meets the needs that are currently available. And I think in some of the examples that you'll hear from Carla and Tony, we have some really nice examples of the way that that has unfolded in several communities. I also just want to share that we have these service area specific competitions, but we also throughout the year, based on federal appropriations, might have other national competitions that are available as well. So we have had 3 rounds at this point of funding at a national level, so not limited to any particular service area, for Early Head Start expansion broadly and Early Head Start Child Care Partnership. And then we might have additional funding, for example, for a broader expansion of the program, either in Head Start or Early Head Start. Any time that we make funding available, we like to give the communities a heads up that the money is coming so that they can plan for the availability of those funds, begin to have the early conversations with the important community partners. That happens through a process called a forecast, and all of our forecasts are posted at the grants.gov website, and that includes important information about the service area that's available, the level of funding, and most importantly, when the full announcement will be made available for the public. And then that full announcement is posted both on grants.gov and the ACF website. Two more quick statements, and then I'll turn it back over to Jeff. I think one, what I've learned over my work in the past couple of years with these incredible partners is sometimes it's hard, many times I would say it's hard for the community, one, to even be aware that their grantee, their Head Start provider, is in competition. We notify our grantees in the winter of every year, so usually around February, for many reasons. They rarely make that information public in the community, but there is lots of time, planning time, between when we know what organization is going to go into competition or when a service area and the funding will be available and where. We usually have that information in the winter of a year, which is several months before we post the opportunity or even forecast. So the forecasts typically happen late spring, early summer, and then we try to post the full announcements in the fall. That said, any information that this group or others that aren't able to join us today would like, so in addition to understanding the communities are available, to the extent that we could share the names of the providers that are in competition, we certainly are more than happy to do that. Also, my final statement is we, through partnership with the Policy Equity Group, if there are other considerations that philanthropic partners might have that we think would benefit either the competitive outcome or the way that the competition unfolds in the community, or the opportunity to bring together the right partners and conversations so that folks are ready to submit their application, we have also in the past exercised some flexibilities there. So for example, we could, with enough notice, decide maybe September is not the best time to make an announcement of funding. Would the Office of Head Start consider posting the announcement at another time? That would be a conversation we would be open to having. Or we recently extended the dates when a competition or the applications were due, again, in conversation with our philanthropic partners, to support other work that was happening at the community level as groups were getting folks ready and galvanized to submit the highest quality applications supported by other resources that were being made available in those local communities. So just wanted to share some of those flexibilities and to thank Shannon again for making this opportunity available for us today, and I look forward to the questions. Jeff?
Thank you, Shauna. And I just want to sort of highlight one of the things that Shauna said. I think, the Office of Head Start has been such a great partner with communities around being flexible to make sure that the competition yields like the best possible outcome. And so, to the extent that, this is really just, the first round of this. This is something that's going to be happening sort of every year starting in September. So even if we don't fully take advantage of this competitive opportunity, there'll be other opportunities. And I know the Office of Head Start is more than willing to work with us to make sure that we really achieve a strong outcome. So Shauna, we have a question for Whitney. It sounds like she's developing a community of practice among the Head Start agencies in her community, and was just wondering if there are any specific topics that they should be focusing on in terms of programming that they should be lifting up in their conversations in their community of practice? What would be most impactful for them to be focused on?
Wow, that's I know I don't have a long time, but I could answer that question for an hour. I think when we think about the things that are really impacting our grantees, certainly teacher qualifications and teaching staff retention has been really impactful for our grantees. Certainly the awareness of what it means to have a lack of teaching staff available. For us, what that has led to is a direct correlation to a grantee's ability to maintain what we call as their funded enrollment. So all of our grantees are funded at a specific dollar value, as well as then those funds equate to a specific level of enrollment. What we're hearing a lot from our grantees is that their inability to stay fully enrolled is directly correlated to their inability to retain qualified staff. So those are really important conversations that we're always looking for, creative solutions, not only for us at a national level, but certainly that our grantees can impact in their specific communities. And then certainly continuing to improve the quality of classroom environments and quality of comprehensive services for our families. Always a really important conversation to have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shauna. And I would just add, these Head Start programs are required to do a community needs assessment every few years. And I think, looking to that community needs assessment about what are the key areas of need within the community could then become, the topics of conversation. So I was in a community meeting this week where infant and early childhood mental health and behavioral issues in the classroom was a huge issue for the community, and so that's becoming something that they're going to be working on in their sort of reapplication process. So you can also look to the community needs assessment. So but I'm going to start to interview Carla and Tony, but I just wanted to really quickly give you sort of an example of what we're going to be sending you in terms of the matrix that has the competitions on it. So this is one for Missouri. I know there's a question about that. So essentially what you're going to be getting is a matrix where on the left-hand side, it's the community that has the competition, the type of competition it is. It's an early Head Start or Head Start competition, and the amount of funding that's available for that community. And then on the far right is how many expected awards that the Office of Head Start will award for that community. So just to give you some context about sort of what we are going to be sending you after the webinar.
Jeff, this is Shauna. Can I just make a comment on a number of awards?
Yes, absolutely.
For folks to understand. So when you're looking at an available funding opportunity announcement, if there's any number that's greater than 1, it means that we might make, as a result of the competition, so based on who applies and the quality of those applications, you might have a community, let's say in Missouri, where there is currently 1 provider. The results of the competition might yield 2 providers. And certainly in multi-county service areas or multi-state service areas, our approach to that would be to award part of the funding to one organization to serve some subset of those available communities, and the remaining funds to another organization to serve a subset of the available communities. We could also, as a result of competition and based on who applies, still result in only 1 provider. So any number greater than 1 simply indicates that there is also flexibility on the outcome of the competition.
Great. Thank you, Shauna. So I wanted to bring in Tony and Carla now. I just wanted to ask you, I know you guys have been heavily involved in these competitions in Detroit and Louisville, and just wanted to talk to you a little bit about sort of what made you get involved, like what was the motivating force behind engaging with the Head Start competitions in your communities. I don't know, Carla, would you want to start? As she unmutes. All right, maybe Tony, you should start. All right, Carly,
all right.
there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Got it. Carly, are you there now?
Yeah, I've been here. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, got it. All right, we can hear you. So, can you talk a little bit about sort of what got you interested and motivated to be a part of the Head Start competition in Detroit?
Sure. So I did start talking, so now I'll just repeat what I said. So I practiced a little. So thank you again for the opportunity, and thanks to everyone for joining the call. The Kellogg Foundation has been a longtime funder in the field of early care and education and early childhood development. And we knew that Head Start was a critical piece of that opportunity for families. And because we fully support Head Start, we wanted to make sure that no community lost their Head Start slots and that children would always have access to the highest quality of care and education. What we were particularly interested at the time when the competition first came on board was that we have a commitment to places, and Detroit was one of those cities where we had a commitment. We saw massive flight. We knew that there weren't enough seats available in early childhood programs at all, regardless of quality, and that there were a number of families who were seeking the best opportunities for their children. And so when the opportunity to think about who could be the Head Start grantee in that community, we thought, we don't want to pick a side. At the end of the day, we want the best provider to be able to provide the highest quality services. What we could do instead was create an easier pathway for them to access information about the community at large. And so that's why we decided to both come up with a strategy of support, but also create less competition amongst potential grantees and more of a thought partnership around what do we need to do to care for the children of Detroit, and how could we use this opportunity to the fullest advantage.
That's great. Yeah, I think, one of the important points about the Detroit example is that you don't have to pick winners and losers, right? You can do an initiative where you're trying to support everyone in competition and try to coordinate the applicants in a way where you minimize the level of competition to benefit the entire community. And I think that was a pretty amazing sort of effort in Detroit.
Yeah.
So Tony,
we can talk about the details if you want, but I didn't know how you want to go from there.
No, you're doing great. And so Tony, can you talk a little bit about Louisville and what got you motivated?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's interesting. Unlike Kellogg, the CE&S Foundation, which is a local family foundation, had not been working in early childhood for very long, only about 5 years. But when I joined the foundation, I am a former Head Start Policy Council member and had worked on a large Head Start Family Literacy Training and Technical Assistance Initiative way back in the early 2000s. And in the mayor's office, we had launched an early care and education coalition locally trying to sort out and help to systems build a bit in the early care and ed area. And we had this challenge where we had a singular Head Start grantee, the school district, for decades, in excess of 30-something years at least. And we had been having conversations about how do we create better partnerships across the district, school district, state-funded pre-K, Head Start, private child care, all of those things. We've been having those conversations. And then one day we wake up and our school district had fully relinquished the Head Start grant. So we had to I actually reached out to our coalition that morning and said, this is sort of a once-in-a-generation opportunity to figure out how we build this. And then all of a sudden got hit with the realization that no one in the community actually had too much experience with Head Start. So that's sort of our entry point in Louisville, knowing that now is an opportunity to create some new partnerships.
Great. Thank you. And so to both of you, so tell me a little bit about, what exactly did you do in these communities to support the competition? Carla, do you want to go first?
Sure. So first, one of the greatest gifts of philanthropy is the power to convene people and bring them together. And so we hosted a series of community meetings that brought the mayor's office, the Department of Health, the public school district, as well as community resources together to say, here's an opportunity for us. It doesn't only impact the grantee and the kids that they serve, but it impacts the entire city of Detroit. What are some of the key things that are top of mind for you that you'd love to be able to see us provide to children and families? And so we did that and just got a sense of what were some of the priorities for each one of the key stakeholders. We knew that part of the application would involve a community needs assessment, and that there needed to also be studies around both what's the teaching workforce, what are the feeder programs into Head Start programs, what programs do the Head Start children, once they complete the program, go into in the public school system. And so as opposed of having multiple applications and multiple grantees conducting needs assessment, we said we'll use our philanthropic resources to conduct the needs assessment so that you all have the same information and you're working from the same point of view and vantage point. We also conducted a study around the current state of the Head Start workforce and to figure out where the supply and demand was going to be and how that aligned to the Head Start performance standards. And then that's something that we gave to everyone so that they had that as a point of reference and they didn't have to use their limited resources to conduct these studies that may or may not be as in-depth as they needed to have a strong application. And then lastly, we provided technical assistance and coaching around how to complete a quality application. And that was open to anyone who was interested in applying to be a Head Start grantee, but also folks who were just interested in understanding what that process was like. They were all able to join us for every one of these conversations, and everyone was able to access both the study on the workforce as well as the community needs assessment.
Great. Yeah, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like thinking back to that slide about the different aspects of the application, and it sounds like you were really helping with that first sort of demonstration of need section, really helping with the staffing section, and so that really gave these programs the opportunity to focus on that model section, which is worth the most points. So thank you for sharing.
And it was also a little self-serving because we knew that we wanted to have other funding opportunities that wrapped around Head Start for the typical child care programs and the family child care programs. And the more information we had about the early childhood ecosystem, the better off it would be for whoever wanted to invest in Detroit around early childhood.
Great. Thank you. And so, Tony, it sounded like, you were really thinking kind of from a systems perspective when sort of the school district relinquished and you had this opportunity. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how you tried to support the competition?
Sure. So the very first thing I did was reach out to a few people I knew that knew Head Start well at the national level, and the very first bit of advice I had was call Kellogg. So I spent time on the phone with the folks at Kellogg and Kresge to hear about the work that they had done. And so as a result, we did some similar things in terms of we convened and actually co-hosted one of the community meetings with the Office of Head Start. We would convene regularly and update the other local funders in Louisville, Kentucky. And then we also connected folks in the community with consultants to help understand the opportunity and help it feel more accessible, because again, I think our biggest challenge was we had no delegate agencies in the community. No one had been providing Head Start, so this was a struggle for organizations to understand how they could or if they would have the capacity to do it. And then interestingly enough, we had just by chance been working on a supply and demand study around early care and ed when the school district relinquished, and we basically stopped exactly what we were doing and sort of converted it into an online resource that anyone could use in terms of looking at neighborhoods and zips and numbers of infants and toddlers and 3s and 4s and all of those things. And ultimately, all of those applying were able to use that in their work. And then we also, taking one of many pages from the Kellogg Playbook, offered support during the application process for those applying. But I will tell you that actually, again, we had a fairly small pool of folks going after it, and none of them took us up on that particular offer.
Okay. Interesting. And I think, it's interesting that, Head Start can be kind of a black box within a community, right? And so it can be overwhelming when this opportunity becomes available and you see the application and, you have to write 100 pages. It can be difficult. So I think, kind of spreading that awareness is really important. And I think, now I think you're going to need to pay it forward. You called Kellogg. So I think, we need to offer for other people on the call to be able to, on the webinar, to be able to call you to get support as well.
Absolutely.
But we're running out of time. So one final question about sort of the outcomes. Like, what was achieved as a result of your support in these communities with regard to the results of the competition?
So we were successful. Yeah, we were successful in the competition, and we did receive an award, and we had 4 grantees who were providing service to children in Detroit. So that was a key win for us. We didn't lose any programs, and we were able to keep this great program going. But what it also did for us was raise the visibility of the need for investment in early childhood education. And so Kellogg, along with Kresge, committed $50 million for our Hope Starts Here initiative, which is our early childhood education initiative, to increase access to facilities, quality, scholarships, pipelines of teachers. And that's something that we didn't anticipate, but we're super excited is happening.
Yes. Great. Tony, what about you?
So we're super excited. In Louisville, actually, just about a week and a half ago, we found out that we have 2 new grantees serving Louisville, Kentucky. So they're both new players. Not necessarily, one is a new player in Louisville, but had been working on Head Start inside Louisville and the edges a little bit in some of the counties. But then 2 organizations that partnered together locally. And so we're really excited about the partnerships and the opportunities we have with this. So we're looking forward to it. And it's really changed the landscape. I mean, overnight we go from having a school district and private child care providers being sort of the game to now we have at least, 4 or 5 players that we can start putting together to start to really build the system. And next Wednesday, I'm convening our philanthropic community to start talking about how we could use private resources to get this launched quickly, efficiently, and effectively.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask you about sort of plans to support implementation. So it sounds like you're thinking about that.
We sure are.
Great. So great. And any questions from anybody on the webinar? I don't see anything coming in the chat box, but I don't know if I'm actually doing it right.
So, Jeff, this is Shannon. I just want to underscore and maybe ask that question. Shauna might want to get in on that too, which is when there has been a transition, what are some things you would want people to keep in mind about the ramp-up period, right? Like I know, for example, in the situation that Tony's community faces, there could be like facilities issues, right? If in terms of like physically, where are we going to be able to find child-friendly spaces to provide? And you talked a little bit about teacher pipelines. I'm just wondering if you have other thoughts about that.
This is Shauna. I'll jump in. I think in both scenario, in our work with the Kellogg Foundation and with CNNS. With the Kellogg Foundation specifically, we, did not have here at the federal level a deep awareness of all of the other investments that were happening, particularly with a specific grantee for a facilities-related initiative. And so for us, it was an important conversation to have and know about early so that we made sure that our work did not negatively impact that tremendous work that was already happening at the local level. So that was really important. And in Louisville, again, our early conversations with Tony and his sharing the information about other work, other early childcare investments, childhood investments that were being made in the city, who was doing that work, what that might look like in the future, what facilities availability look like. Again, they had a school district that was the provider, and so we don't currently have any available facilities, but the foundation being able to partner with us, at least in thinking about that early, was incredibly helpful so that we could make sure we had additional resources federally to support applicants in their future needs. And again, as Tony indicated, then the partnership with these new providers that also have startup funding to get ramped up in communities was just helpful for us to know in advance, and we would not have known absent this relationship.
So Jeff, I do see that we have a question about national organizations that would be providing technical assistance for these recompetitions, and I'm thinking of, I think that probably means throughout the whole life cycle that we talked about, and it seems worth knowing. And we have Trust for Learning on the call with us, and they say that they do facilitate a group called the Inspired Head Start Network, which is a group of Head Start providers focused on ideal learning. But maybe that question needs to be our last question about, is there a national technical assistance effort or technical assistance group that people should know about?
Great. For the competitions, I mean, I do a lot of this work, and I think one of the things that is, I think, really important as you think about getting support for your communities is that, you know, you want to build local capacity around supporting these Head Start programs. So to the extent that you work with a national partner, it'll be just really important to sort of partner with someone locally to be able to sort of, you know, sustain sort of the implementation and the work going on. I think, you know, in my work in Detroit, you know, I work very closely with IFF, who's a great partner, help build capacity around Head Start with them. And so I think that's, you know, one of the considerations as you think about sort of partnering with different national entities as well. And Jen, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody, especially our presenters. I think this was exactly what we hope to share with folks, both some factual information about Head Start and the Head Start process in terms of grantees, both in terms of finding the best grantees for communities and then supporting those grantees once they've been awarded, and then to have some reflections from foundations coming from different perspectives in terms of size and scope and focus about how we can be involved. So I think this was really what we hoped, and I appreciate I could tell from the level of questions that there was deep engagement. So I will say that we will send out slides and the charts that we have promised, but also speaking for ECFC, which consists of me, Shannon, Rena, and Sweta, we'd really love feedback from anybody on the call about, was this useful? What additional things would you like to know? What additional public-private partnership programming would you like to see from us? And because people have too many evaluations in their lives, you will not get a formal evaluation about this webinar, but emails that say, you know, what you're interested in learning more about and what would be helpful are always welcome. And with that, I'll just say thanks to everybody and have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, Shannon. You too.
Thank you.